Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast, which is being organised by Young Making Votes Matter. And we're going to find out about electoral reform and activism today from a young person's perspective. And it's a real honour to introduce Josh and Amelie, who are going to be talking about how they've got involved in the movement and in campaigning for political change moving forward. So do we want to do a brief introduction? So Josh, we'll start with you because you're in the top box on my
Yes.
computer. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Josh. I'm from the Lake District at University of Strathclyde, studying politics and international relations with social policy. I've been involved with Youth Makes Votes Matter, which is like a kind of branch off for directed at the youth to bring greater activism to our cause. I've been involved for about a month now. Will be for a long time in the future, hopefully, as our campaign gets out there. And I've been interested in PR for a long time. So I worked with a company called Compass in the last election, who were advocating for MPs in any political party who advocated for PR so that the issue could be brought up in Parliament. So that's what I did for my local MP, who did support proportional representation and still does. And we got her elected, which is brilliant.
The journey continues. Thanks very much, Josh. And Emily, how did you end up as part of this kind of movement?
So I am 21. I'm a politics and international relations student at Royal Holloway. And because I kind of took a couple years out of education, I had a baby, and it just really reorganized like my priorities. And so I kind of joined the Green Party earlier this year, and I've been quite involved with the Young Greens. And I just kind of discovered that proportional representation is really, really important to the Green Party. I just thought it made sense to a campaign like Make Votes Matter, which is a single issue campaign. So it's very focused on just proportional representation. There are other campaigns that are campaigning for proportional representation, but Make Votes Matter made the most sense to me because it was very focused on just PR.
Good. And I remember the 2011 referendum we had on voting reform. I voted for, that was for something slightly different to PR, but there was a huge kind of counter reaction against that movement because obviously political parties have then got less control over outcomes. With PR and wider reform, when every seat and every vote matters, it's much harder for vested interests to can kind of like have any control over or the outcome of elections. So for me, it's a big issue in terms of transparency and also just making the word democracy more relevant, ruled by the people, where every vote counts, regardless of where you live and what your constituency is like. So I think it's a great thing and we definitely need more of it. So Josh, first of all, why is PR in particular important to you?
I believe in justice foremost and equality in democracy. And at the moment in our country, we don't have equality in democracy because first past the post voting system we have at the moment, there was a record of 74% of wasted votes, I think, in the last election, which is the highest ever. So basically your vote just does not count towards the eventual MP and does not matter. With proportional representation, nearly every single vote will count. And that is what we need to strive for. People need to be interested in politics. People need to not have their political diversity suppressed, as in all of the voters for, let's say, Reform UK, Green Party, and the SNP had, I think it was 400,000, but for every 400,000 Green Party votes, there was one MP. For every 800,000 Reform UK votes, there was one MP. So to combat this and to not have people's political diversity suppressed, which is what I really believe in, and people need trust in politics. People don't have trust in politics. People don't believe that their vote matters, which creates tension and anger. And this is all because of our political system. This is not because of who is in charge. It is a little bit because of how rigged the voting system is for Labour, Tories. There's no other choice. So I believe in equality and justice. So that's why I'm in the campaign and I'm really excited for the future.
Yeah, definitely. And first past the post, whoever gets the majority of votes in a particular constituency wins. So even if more people voted for other candidates or more people didn't vote, someone where quite a small minority of votes can actually win. And we've seen that pan out not just locally, but in the national picture. You have a party that's got, in the 30s for percentage of votes, who runs home with a huge majority, like the current Labour government. I think one of the big things about PR is it's not about excluding people either. It's saying to people, like, if you vote for minority parties, you will be represented in government. That is what rule by the people is all about. And I think that's very, very important as well. It's not excluding parties. Minority parties will become part of government coalitions that genuinely represent what people have voted for. And I couldn't agree more. Amelie, why is PR important to you?
I was just kind of listening to something that Josh was saying, and he was talking about how diverse the UK is right now. And it really struck me because, especially my university, you see so many different ethnicities, so many different places where people come from. And the reality is that most of those people have things that they need representing in government, in parliament, and their MP is just not the one that they voted for. So one really important thing for me is getting the word out there of PR, because the really interesting thing is that if someone actually heard the definition of PR, they would think, well, that seems like an obvious solution, but not many people know what PR is. So I think one really important thing is just education. And in my course, we have a whole module on, democracy, and that's great, but also education for people that aren't politically inclined. So one thing is just talking about this as much as possible, podcasts, getting it in the mainstream media. Unfortunately, there are some political parties that aren't as, happy to introduce PR as others. Conservatives, you'll find some conservatives that do like it and some conservatives that don't. Parties that are, most for it are Lib Dems and Greens. But yeah, for me, it's just about education. And you'll find that hopefully it's when, not if, when PR does get introduced, that the results will look drastically different to even what, some people have predicted, right? Because people are predicting the results based on how people voted. So they said, oh, this year, a certain amount of people voted Green, right? So if PR was in place this year, Greens would have gotten 90 seats, okay? But they're not taking into account all the people that didn't vote because they thought it was completely pointless. So with PR, we're looking at possibly, like in the millions that are voting that didn't vote. We've got so many young people that didn't vote, and that's who I want to see represented. I want to see the young people represented and all their issues, because also with PR, it is more about the people and not about the individual parties. Because right now, with first past the post, politics is like a marketing system, right? They're marketing to us, oh, vote for us instead of them because we're better. It's like, it's so awful. It's like Apple and Samsung, like, oh, buy my phone because I'm better. But with PR, it becomes more about what they're actually selling us, right? So it becomes more like, oh, we would give you this. And it becomes more about their manifestos. Because actually, I don't know many people. I read my party manifesto because I'm very involved. But if you're not involved with your party, if you're just a normal human being who wants their life improved, it's not really no one really reads the manifestos. No one really knows what these parties are offering you, because it's more like a game of like, oh, I'm better than you, and it shouldn't really be like that, we're talking about people's lives here. Yeah.
I think, as you say, PR offers you the chance to vote more positively rather than saying, I don't want that other party out of two parties. And I think I live in Bootle, which used to be I think it used to be the safest seat in the country. It may still be that. And my vote has never counted or mattered whatsoever. And I'm part of that 74%. I think when you can say to young people, because the low turnout at the last election, many people thought, oh, Labour are going to win. So you had loads of people who said, there's no point in me voting because Labour are going to win. Then you had loads of people staying at home on the other side because they said, oh, Labour are going to win anyway. And it doesn't help with participation and also the legitimacy of people who vote, regardless of why they vote for whatever they vote. When people vote, when those votes don't translate into actual representation. And I used to be a teacher, and when I used to teach PR, I used to say to people, if a party gets 23% of the vote, they get 23% of the seats in a national parliament. You can still have local accountability to people, but that parliament represents the people, and that's what parliamentary sovereignty should be about. I think there's only the UK, maybe the US for their national elections. There's one other country in Europe which still...
Belarus.
There's a Belarus that still uses first past the post. And if you look at all of those three examples, would you say that they're more moderate and stable countries than others? Certainly not. So I think that PR puts legitimacy and democracy right at the heart of national life, and I think it's absolutely essential. I think you've both covered the key points there. The cost of living, property, etc. Many people say that the younger are more disadvantaged, and it's the first time ever that we've had a generation that's going to be poorer than the parents. And a lot of young people feel often that they haven't got a voice. Start with you, Josh. Why do you feel that activism, and not just voting, but also activism, is important in changing the country?
So being able to vote for what you believe in is paramount, and people don't be so involved in politics because they're all the same. They think they're all the same because they haven't really got a choice of who to vote for. So I've had loads of mates growing up who come from quite impoverished backgrounds, and they don't care. They don't care about the games that politicians play. They just care about how to put food on the plate, how to look after the siblings, whatever. This is why I really feel really strongly about how we need to be represented by people who actually care for us. There's a lot of false information going out there about, especially come up to elections, when they're like, oh, we'll do this for you, we'll do this for you, but it's a total lie. But we've only got a choice, really. Well, in my constituency, between the Tories and Labour, because of the system. And if you don't want to vote for them, your vote is wasted. Your vote's wasted, whoever you vote for, 74%, I'm saying. But that includes the amount of votes over the threshold that they beat the other party. So the amount of Labour beat the Tories in my constituency, they're all wasted votes as well. And I feel sad how tactical voting is also a thing. That you cannot vote for your first choice person. It's the same in France here, but 4 out of 10 people said they were tactically voting this election, which is a crazy number. That's 40% of the country, which is outstanding, because that's 40% of people who haven't voted for the party they want to vote for. Now, imagine if that was a proportional representation system. Imagine that was votes for Green Reform, votes for Lib Dems, votes for whoever else. The political landscape would look so different. People would have what they asked for, which is fair in the end.
And I think that kind of defeatism when you're young, politics is seen as something that you see on TV or that older people do. And literally, we know from the statistics that people over 50, might even be 55 now, are far, far more likely to vote. And young people are feeling, well, my individual vote doesn't matter, and life's tough, and life's tougher than it was for my parents. And it just takes that power away from people, and it removes that legitimacy. I think as well as that, it also kind of makes things like electoral interference and parties focusing on certain seats, because, if they win in a few key seats, that can sway elections. That's not democracy. I mean, if you look at the old kind of rotten boroughs and the way that they used to manage constituencies back in the day, and we look back at that now and go, isn't that disgraceful? A lot of what goes on now, people just take it for granted, and both of the main parties are just trying to focus on winning elections, and they're not focused on long-term electoral reform. And going back to what Amelie said earlier, as soon as a party wins under first past the post, they then got an incentive to kind of maintain that position moving on into future elections, which makes electoral reform far less likely in the future. Amelie, just moving on to you now, why do you think that activism in particular and young people coming together to push for electoral reform and reform generally? Why do you think that that's important?
First of all, there's this kind of like myth, which I really do not like, the myth that young people don't have any power. And I think it's something kind of propagated by, the older generation who wants to just keep things as they are. But the reality is, like, times are changing. And so things need to change. Otherwise, it's, in my opinion, how things are right now is just completely unsustainable. So, yeah, I think, again, when we were setting up it was kind of, a group effort. And when we were talking about it, we were like, are we going to put an age on this young Make Votes Matter? Like, are we going to say 18 to 25 or 18, whatever? And then we kind of talked and we said, if we're being honest, like, the word young is very subjective. And if you think about someone that's 50 in the House of Commons, then 30 would seem young in comparison to that. So what we're really talking about is just like the generation of people whose voice just hasn't been heard when we think about young votes, Make Votes Matter. So yeah, I think it's really important to just have as many conversations as possible. And I say this because the way people understand that and the way people will want to be on board is by listening to them first. So if you talk to someone who is completely against PR, right, just have a conversation with them, get them to explain why. So that's why it's all about having conversations. It's all about getting people to understand. And if they still feel that PR is just not the way to go, fine, so be it, but at least have that conversation with them. And yeah, and I think that the youth definitely need to be empowered. I think one way, as well as PR, to do that is to lower the votes to 16. So yeah, I think it's just really important to get our voices out there and yeah, to campaign as much as possible.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think that Make Votes Matter, obviously, as you said, single issue, but the youth aspect of it, again, is pushing for young people to come together. And I think that people coming together with a similar interest up against a lot of opposition sometimes. And again, before your time, the 2011 alternative vote referendum, some of the dirty tricks which were done to oppose that, mainly from the Conservative Party at the time, it was just so underhand, and they just wanted that gone because it means that they've got less control. The parties can then no longer control electoral outcomes as much when we've got a PR system. And a lot of people as well cite like PR. Now, that's what happened in Germany in the 20s, which led to the rise of Nazism, etc. And it's not really a good example because there was a complete economic collapse in Germany. It was in a really bad way, and it did lead to a lot of chaos because of the wider socio-economic situation. But PR, it puts representation at the heart of things. And if you were in a room and 2 or 3 people out of 10 voted for a particular issue, and then we said, all right, let's do what those 2 or 3 people have done, everyone would go, that's ridiculous. But that's effectively what's happening now. 74% of votes are wasted, as Josh said. And PR, it's a way of making sure that moving forward, everyone knows that every single vote matters. It increases democracy and transparency. And it may well introduce coalition government, but that's based on the consensus of who's voted. One of the big things against PR I've heard of in the past is, oh yeah, but it gives strong government. How can you have strong governments with 60 or 70% of the seats if only 30%? There's no legitimacy. There's no democratic connection whatsoever. And I think that's the big issue there that we need to certainly face up to as a country. Josh, is there anything else that you want to add about why PR or activism are important to you? I think we've covered the main points there.
Yeah. So basically, as you're on about the alternative voting system, when the referendum came up before it, such as in the Brexit campaign, such as in any national referendum, the newspapers, it will happen when there is a referendum in the future on proportional representation, no matter what system it is, there will be lies because they want tradition to be kept. They want to keep all of the power in their hand. And that's what will happen, really, unfortunately. Another lie about first past the post voting system is that it's a very stable system compared to proportional representation, as you've got one strong government it's in fact not a strong government. It looks like it should be because it's one ruling party. We shouldn't have any disagreements. It should be going through the legislation, but it's not. I think we last an average of 60% of the government term. So a government term is 5 years. That's about, I don't know, 2.8 years. First past the post doesn't work in that sense.
And also, they talk about strong governments with no legitimacy. If you haven't got legitimacy in the first place by the majority of people, it's a strong government with an illegitimate basis, isn't it? But they're all good points. And I think the power of the media, particularly in the UK, the print media on the right are really going to push hard against any attempt to change things. Amelie, is there anything else that you want to add about PR activism, why it's important?
Yeah. So my point is kind of more about just like how, first past the post just doesn't work with British politics at all. And it's the fact that why do we have, right, a majority Labour government at the moment? We have a majority Labour government because people are disenfranchised, right, with everything that the Conservatives have done. And they think, what's my other option, right? And they think, oh, Labour, because that in their minds is like the opposite of Conservatives. So it's not a very good way of thinking, but it's right. It's the only way of thinking that they have under first past the post. So what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years when there's another general election? People are going to be disenfranchised with Labour and they're going to think, oh, Conservatives didn't work, Labour didn't work. Oh, Lib Dem, and obviously I don't know if that's going to happen, but the way of thinking, I'm just going off of what's happened. Oh, let's vote for Lib Dem. But the issue is here that people are putting their faith in one party to solve all the problems of this country. And the issue is that one party, right, they're going to have one set of values. And the thing is about British politics, it's very reductive, okay? We always hope that one person is going to come and solve everything. And the thing with proportional representation is it allows everybody, all the parties to come together and put all their eggs in and help with all the issues. We've got Greens wanting to help with the climate change, lowering the voting age, and ceasefire in Israel, Gaza. And we've got the Lib Dems, and I don't know their manifestos, but they've got other things that they're working on. And you need to choose, again, one party to solve all your problems. It's not going to work. You need them all to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's an interesting time in politics. I certainly think that since the Brexit referendum, the divisions have really, really been stark, and there's a lot of culture war issues now. And it's like even something like PR, it's become a big culture war issue where a lot of people on the right and also a lot of people kind of on the centre left think, oh, that's not that important. In fact, it provides the very basis of where everything else springs from. And I think that's really important to bear in mind. And just to tie things together, I'm just going to quote Yuval Harari, who says that first, we've got 3 obligations: one, to know yourself; one, to improve yourself; and one, to join groups with people who've got similar interests to your own to try and affect change, because it is hard to change things by yourself. So make votes matter, and Young make votes matter. People can get involved and join and become part of this movement for PR and electoral reform. But also, as Amelie said earlier, we need to have these conversations, get it out there, share with other people, and particularly in different political parties, different groups, push for this at the grassroots level and look for long-term change. But we should, again, as Winston Churchill said, never, ever, 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 ever give up. And it's important that we fight for these rights, because as we've seen in recent years, we've seen a lot of backsliding on certain things. And even the things that we've got now, we can take them for granted and they can very quickly disappear. And we need to make sure that we stay vigilant and look together to make the world, our own country, our own communities, and ourselves better people and better places. So Josh and Amelie, thank you very much for your hard work and for speaking today about why PR is so important to you and how you got involved in Young Make Votes Matter. And keep up the good work, and hope to speak again real soon.
Yeah.
Thank
you very
you
much.